Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Moving quickly through the last week of October. Great to be with you on a Thursday, October 30th, 2025. And can you believe All Hallows Eve, Halloween tomorrow, All Saints Day, All Souls Day coming up, moving into November already. Hope it's going well for you so far. We have a wonderful show lined up for you today. We have, of course, the one and only Father Mitch Pacwa, and we'll be picking his very large brain, taking a look at what it means to be a doctor of the church, because we have very exciting news. I'm sure you've heard that this weekend, John Henry Newman is going to be named a doctor of the church. And it's really a very powerful thing. And to be a doctor is when you, and I'll let Father Mitch explain it in more detail, of course, but you've had so much influence on the faith in your writings and your witness that you are then declared a doctor. I'm really simplifying it, but Father will give us more details. So looking forward to that, and maybe just touching base with him on some of the other big news stories that are out there. Then I'm excited to interview Father Gregory Pine from the Order of Preachers, the Dominicans, and we're going to be talking about his new book, Your Eucharistic Identity. What a cool title. It's from Ignatius Press. So that's the first hour of the program. Father Mitch Pacwa and Father Gregory Pine joining us on a Thursday morning in the first hour of EWTN's Catholic Connection. Hey, there's some exciting news from Italy. I'm sure many of you remember the major earthquake that hit in central Italy, parts of Umbria and parts of Lazio as well. 2016, it was 9 years ago in the summertime when it just devastated various areas. But the beautiful, beautiful church, the Basilica of St. Benedict, in the birthplace of St. Benedict and St. Scholastica, of course, brother and sister, twins, it is reopening, and they're doing very special ceremonies today and tomorrow. This is so exciting. And I'll be talking a little bit more about it in detail tomorrow, but I did want to mention it because a lot of people are traveling to this area of Umbria because of not only St. Francis, but the newly canonized Carlo Acutis, who is based, his church there where he was buried is St. Mary Major in the center of Assisi. So many people, when they come, they do want to take the trip and go to the birthplace of Benedict and Scholastica. But it's been very, very difficult because the church, which was devastated by the earthquake in 2016, is actually built over the site where these two amazing saints, this brother and sister powerhouse Catholic team, were born. But it's opening now, today and tomorrow. And my assistant Marcy at Teresa Tomeo Communications sent me the article, and I'm sure she'll be posting it on Facebook. Let me just read you a little bit from one of the publications that's talking about this. The reconstruction of the Basilica is not simply an important and daring architectural undertaking or an intervention to recover artistic heritage. It is an act of civil and spiritual resurrection. With these words drawn from the pastoral letter, "Listen, my son, and open your heart willingly," the Archbishop of Spoleto Norcia, Most Reverend Renato Baccardo, accompanies the reopening of the Basilica of St. Benedict, returned to the city and to the faithful today, October 30th, and tomorrow, October 2025, 9 years after its collapse caused by the 2016 earthquake. Now, the church again stands upon the remains of the house where the patron of Europe and St. Scholastica were born, a living sign, he says, of Benedictine spirituality and European memory. After the 2016 earthquake, only the facade remained standing. 80% of the building had collapsed. Today, after a long and collected effort, Norcia finds its heart once again. Norcia, a beautiful city, a beautiful town, and it was devastated by the earthquake. We had our first wine and shrine trip, Kelly Walquist and I, in June of 2016, and that was just a few months before the earthquake hit in August of 2016. And when Deacon Dom and I were coming back and slowly looking at a place and then moving into Umbria part-time, we went back to Norcia occasionally, and let me tell you, it was not the same. It was so devastated by the earthquake. It's still somewhat rough to go to Norcia in terms of walking through the city streets, but thanks be to God, the beautiful church is open. So I'll have more on that tomorrow. I'm going to pull up the letter of the Archbishop and talk about that in the second hour of the show tomorrow. In the meantime, you know what's coming up, but we need to give you the weather before we get to the news this morning. We have widespread rain showers and thunderstorms expected from the Ohio Valley into the northeast part of the country. That's through tomorrow. An isolated damaging wind and tornado threat may occur from coastal North Carolina into parts of the mid-Atlantic. That'll happen today, and then moderate to major coastal flooding is forecast along the East Coast of the second half of this week. It is a Thursday. We're so glad you've tuned into Catholic Connection, EWTN's Catholic Connection, on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Father Mitch Pacwa joining us for our cultural connections, and Father Gregory Pine, his latest book, Eucharistic Identity, that coming up right after the news. It is 5 minutes past the hour on Thursday, October 30th. Some numbers are coming in now as a result of the hurricane that hit Jamaica across the Caribbean. Hurricane Melissa killing over 24 people in the Caribbean. That according to multiple reports. Melissa bringing heavy winds and rain to the Bahamas through last night, and it brought devastating flooding to Cuba after slamming Jamaica earlier this week on Tuesday. And officials in the island nation of Jamaica are assessing the impact after Melissa slammed into their island as a catastrophic Category 5 storm, packing winds of 185 miles an hour. Yvonne Johnson, a senior reporter at the Jamaica Gleaner, says thousands of people are in shelters.
We still yet don't have a handle on the scale of the impact of Hurricane Melissa. The authorities, the Prime Minister expected to lead a tour by helicopter just to get a sense of how widespread the damage is.
Hurricane experts say Melissa is the second strongest Atlantic hurricane in recorded history. It also tied the record for the strongest Atlantic hurricane to make landfall. Melissa's winds have since died down to 90 miles an hour, making it a Category 1 storm. On Wednesday, yesterday, October 29th, at the end of his general audience, the Holy Father has said his thoughts went out to the Caribbean, hit by a storm, again, of catastrophic power. Pope Leo assuring everyone of his closeness and saying he's praying for those who have lost their lives, for those who are fleeing, and for those populations who, awaiting the storm's developments, are experiencing hours of anxiety and concern. He went on to encourage civil authorities to do everything they can possible, and he also thanked Christian communities and volunteer organizations for the relief they are providing. President Trump is headed back to Washington after announcing he's reached a one-year deal with China on critical rare earth minerals and some tariffs. Trump announcing the deal after his meeting with the Chinese president in South Korea. It would see fentanyl-linked tariffs on China lowered by 10%. Cutting tariffs on Chinese exports cut from 57% to 47%. Trump also announcing that China will start buying American soybeans again and said he plans to visit there next year. New documents released suggest former President Biden's FBI may have investigated more than 160 Republicans. Tammy Trujillo has more.
Iowa Republican Chuck Grassley spoke about the new information.
The subpoena requested records and communications related to over 430 individual and organizations. All of them appear to be aimed at Republicans.
The so-called Arctic Frost probe looked into 2020 presidential election interference allegations. Republican members of the House Judiciary Committee said those who were potentially under investigation included Steve Bannon, Rudy Giuliani, and Mark Meadows. In a Truth Social post last week, President Trump accused the investigation of spying on senators and House members. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Texas voters heading to the polls next week to consider Prop 15, the Parental Rights Amendment, a constitutional amendment aimed at enshrining parents' rights in the state constitution. As Catholic News Agency explains, a measure, if approved, would add language to the Constitution in the state affirming that parents have the right to exercise care, custody, and control of the parent's child, including the right to make decisions concerning the child's upbringing and the responsibility to nurture and protect the parent's child. Texas ranks among 26 states with a Parents' Bill of Rights enshrined in state law. That existing statute grants parents a right to full formation or information concerning their child at school, as well as access to their child's student records, copies of state assessments, and teaching materials, among other provisions. As CNA goes on to explain, the Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops telling them it does support the proposed amendment to recognize the natural right of parents to direct their children's upbringing. Mark Mayfield tells us Vice President J.D. Vance says Charlie Kirk's death was a tragedy for the United States of America.
Vance delivered remarks at a Turning Point USA tour stop at the University of Mississippi on Wednesday.
He was a person who, particularly to the young people of this country, to all of you, he had the very best advice. And I think that's the most important way for me to honor Charlie, which is to repeat that advice.
He went on, saying Kirk's most important advice to young people was to get married and start a family. Vance was a close friend of Kirk, who was assassinated at a speaking event in September. Vance appeared alongside Erica Kirk, the late conservative activist wife, and the new CEO of TPUSA. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Meanwhile, as you just heard, the widow of Charlie Kirk, Erica Kirk, also paying tribute to her late husband yesterday.
You guys have no idea how helpful it is to have all of you in my life, because you help me feel even more deeply connected to my husband.
Erica also saying her husband believed in the importance of young people, importance of Gen Z.
Gen Z, you are the courageous generation. Hear me when I say that. My husband believed that to his core.
The event yesterday coming over a month after the Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk was assassinated at a speaking event in Utah. The Supreme Court won't issue a ruling on President Trump's National Guard troop deployment to Chicago until sometime next month. Yesterday, the High Court asking for additional briefing before it makes its ruling. The justice is asking for both the Trump administration and the state of Illinois to address the term regular law in the federal law used by the president to deploy the Guard. The deployment of National Guard troops to Chicago was blocked earlier this month by a federal court. The Supreme Court now indicating it won't issue a ruling until November 17th, and they say that's the earliest. Fed Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says another interest rate cut in December is not a foregone conclusion.
In the near term, risks to inflation are tilted to the upside and risks to employment to the downside. A challenging situation. There is no risk-free path for policy as we navigate this tension between our employment and inflation goals.
This after the central bank lowered interest rates by 0.25 percentage point Wednesday. It marked the second straight interest rate cut. Powell acknowledging the government shutdown impacted the decision-making process due to the limits of available information. The benchmark rate is now in a range of 3.75% to 4%. The Fed's cut has a trickle-down impact on consumers, lowering mortgage, credit card, and auto loan interest rates. And the White House is announcing another plan meant to lower the cost of prescription drugs in the U.S.
This is a victory for patients, for innovation, and for common sense.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. saying the FDA will be making it easier for biosimilars to enter U.S. markets, something Europe has been doing for decades. Those drugs are drugs similar to those at work and have already been approved by the federal government. Kennedy says he's cutting the red tape and clinical trials that are necessary before these types of drugs can be sold in the U.S. And Character AI is planning to ban children from talking with its AI chatbot starting next month.
The company will remove the ability for users under 18 years old to engage in open-ended conversations with AI by November 25th after growing scrutiny over how young users are interacting with the technology. However, Character AI did note that it plans to develop an under 18 experience, allowing teens to create videos, stories, and streams with its AI characters. Changes to the platform's accessibility also follows an FTC inquiry into AI chatbots in September, and the commission requested information from Character AI, OpenAI, and several other leading tech firms. I'm Matt Mattinson.
And I'm Teresa Tomeo. We take a quick break and we bring up the one, the only, Father Mitch Pacwa for a Thursday morning segment or two of our Cultural Connections. You're listening to EWTN. We'll be right back on the Thursday. Recall that on September 28th, during the Jubilee of Catechists, our Holy Father Pope Leo confirmed that St. John Henry Newman would receive the honor of becoming a doctor of the Church, and that's happening on All Saints' Day, November 1st. And it highlights Newman's influential role in renewing theology and understanding Christian doctrine. For more on this, and what does it mean to be a doctor of the Church, we go to our very own Father Mitch Pacwa for our Cultural Connections. This is very exciting, Father. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. How the heaven are you?
I am well, thank you. Thank you. Excited to talk about St. John Henry Newman. So what does it mean to be a doctor of the Church, first of all?
This is a fairly rare designation. Right now there are, I think, 37 doctors of the Church over the last 2,000 years. he'll be the 38th. This is truly remarkable. And the word doctor means teacher in Latin. It comes from the word docere. Docere, to teach, then has its nominal form as doctor. And this is a very important role to be an official doctor of the church, because it's saying that this saint's writings can be trusted to represent the teaching of the church. And you can go with confidence to the things that he or she has written and trust that they authentically present the church teaching and they give insight on key issues. So, we have, the famous four doctors of the Latin Church that were part of the, especially in the 4th century, like St. Augustine and St. Gregory the Great, Pope St. Leo, and St. It just slipped my mind. But these have been the classic ones. But there are other doctors of the church who have taught, oftentimes in times of crisis, like St. Robert Bellarmine is a doctor of the church, and St. Thomas Aquinas is a doctor of the church. So this is the church saying you can trust these teachers of the faith with great confidence.
How are they chosen, Father?
Well, they're chosen by reflection on their own sanctity, and this gets at in some ways the church's consistent teaching on education. It's something that Pope Leo XIV is bringing up in his new letter on education, that it's not just teaching ideas, but there's a ring of authenticity between the lived faith of the doctor of the church. They actually lived this out. They didn't just have big ideas that they wrote about, but these were ideas that they lived, they struggled with, they worked on. And it was it was both the fruit of their own holiness, and it was something that contributed to their holiness. That's a good quality, so that when we read writings by these doctors of the church, we can address what are oftentimes controversial issues. For instance, Pope Leo the Great was dealing with some of the issues of the Blessed Trinity and the teaching on the nature of Christ. You can trust that what he wrote is authentic. Oh, St. Ambrose, that's the one I forgot, St. Ambrose from Milan. And the same would be true of the great doctors of the Eastern Church. And you can find your spiritual growth and your intellectual growth will be augmented as a true Catholic by reading what they had to say. And, I was really, really blessed when back in 78, I think it was, the first semester, the fall semester of 78, to have Father Theodore Ross, Father Ted Ross, one of my Jesuit brothers, to teach me a course in John Henry Newman. He had given courses on Newman for years, and I was blessed to take him for that. You see that St. John Newman had so many profound insights in doctrine. For instance, he's famous for clarifying how the doctrine develops using Saint Vincent of Lérins, one of the fathers of the Church, but also his teaching on the Arian heresy. He was just brilliant on, understanding what had happened. He pointed out in his book, The Arian Heresy in the 4th century, that 85% of the bishops in the Eastern Church had become Arian heretics. And it's just even though Arianism had been condemned, he was, pointing out that this was still the doctrine held, but it was the faith of the laity that called the bishops back to the Orthodox faith. The laity didn't believe in this stuff, and they helped pull them back. And John Henry Newman described that process brilliantly. But he also wrote books. There are a whole series of books of his collections of sermons. He was not only an academic at Oxford, but he also was an Anglican priest, and then he became a Catholic. And his various sermons from both periods speak of a profound spiritual life. So you can be nourished by that. Not only develop your sense of history and doctrine, but also be nourished spiritually, for instance, among other things, by his sermons.
Does the Pope make the final decision, or is there a team of experts that work with the Pope in the final decision of declaring a doctor?
In terms of this process, it's not just where the Pope gets a whim. This is a discussion that usually goes on after a significant period of time following the death of that saint, that the Church doesn't declare, and the Pope just doesn't feel, we haven't had a doctor in a while like that.
In a while, let's pick one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No. What has been the influence of this saint and his writings? How has that shaken down through history? Now, Cardinal Newman has been dead 130 some years, I think. I forget the exact date of his death, but he's been dead for a while, and his writings continue to be republished and read. And so, and the fruitfulness as Catholic scholars reflect on his work is also continuing to be shown. It's not just that he, passed on ideas from the past, but he gave this seed for important concepts. For instance, a good example would be...
Okay, hold on, Father, because they're coming into a break, and I want you to get cut off, so we'll continue on the other side of the break with Father Mitch Pacwa talking about the latest doctor of the Church, St. John Henry Newman. I sought to hear the voice of God and climb to the topmost steeple, but God declared, go down again, I dwell among the people. I'll be right back. We can believe what we choose. We are answerable for what we choose to believe. To live is to change, and to be perfect is to have changed often. A few great quotes from St. John Henry Newman, who will be named a Doctor of the Church this weekend on All Saints' Day. Father Mitch Pacwa with us for our Cultural Connections on a Thursday. And Father, before we were interrupted by the break, you wanted to talk about a little bit more about the fruitfulness of the great work of this wonderful St. John Henry Newman.
There are so many ways in which this is the case, but one of them that's been much needed today and had a big impact in its own day is his short book. It's not very long. It's called The Idea of a University. And he talks there about the importance of having a number of different schools within a university. That's what makes it a university. There are schools of liberal arts and sciences and professional schools. And for him, the importance is that there was authentic dialogue about ideas and facts. Information is shared, and that the university is a place where ideas can be shared, and you can have these ideas discussed freely. That is so necessary today, because the universities have become the locus of the tyranny of liberalism. That, it's fascinating to me in culture, but also in dealing with individuals. Very frequently, what they decry the most as some of the most egregious sins are what they themselves are doing. So, for instance, you hear cries against fascism and other things. And if you have another opinion, you are in big trouble at these universities. People with conservative opinions. Right now, there have been times when conservatives absolutely forbade liberal ideas from being expressed. That's the case. But then you also have the situation today where people with liberal, and they don't like calling themselves liberal because they don't think it's strong enough. They prefer progressive. But whether you call yourself liberal or progressive, if you are absolutely forbidding the expression of other ideas, you are contradicting exactly what John Henry Newman thought the university ought to be, a place where these different ideas can be shared and discussed, critiqued with logic and such. In many of our universities, the idea of reason is out the window. It sounds crazy, but there are philosophies by people like Jacques Derrida, or Foucault. These philosophers, say that reason is an expression of male oppression, which is an odd thing, because then it implies that women are not rational. What a stupid kind of statement, in my opinion. That rejection of reason is therefore a virtue. So if you try to reason with them, then you are a male oppressor. Now think about that's crazy. At that point, science goes out the window. And the university ought to be a place where people can discuss, debate, present more data, etc. Newman taught that. And by declaring him a doctor, this is not only a recognition of the impact he has had in the past, but this is also a way to say people today ought to pick up his books, including his idea of the university, and begin to apply that at our schools so that education becomes well-rounded and truly well thought out. And this would be a very positive impact. I think that's one of the reasons that Pope Leo XIV is pushing for the making a doctor out of John Henry Newman. Plus, one of the things about Newman, again, a lot of people don't know, but he first learned the classic languages, Greek and Latin, as well as other languages. And he is, you've probably seen that multi-volume collection of the Fathers of the Church. You know, he was one of the translators.
Wow.
You know, again, it's sort of, skipped over because he wrote, it was while he was still an Anglican. But
that was I wanted to ask you that question. Only about 2 minutes left. But speaking of him being a convert from the Anglican, I know the High Anglican Church is very close to Catholicism in many ways. But do you think that with him being a convert and the attention on him this weekend, and of course in recent weeks and months since the Pope made that announcement, that this may encourage Protestants to look at the writings of John Henry Newman and maybe even look at his journey into the Catholic Church?
I would hope so, but I also know that it'll cause some to be afraid to look at him. But I know that that's the case because that it becomes fearful, the possibility that you might end up a Catholic. He actually had been born an Anglican. As a teenager, he joined an evangelical movement and then went into the Oxford movement, which was a high church Anglican movement within Oxford, to rediscover the sources of church history. And as the more he did that, the more he realized he needed to become a Catholic. That's why I think he is the author of that phrase, to go deep in history is to become Catholic.
I'm looking at it right now. To be deep in history is to cease to be Protestant. Yeah. Yeah. And so many of the great converts that we know, they started, for example, even more contemporary converts, such as our good friend the late Deacon Alex Jones. He was studying the Church Fathers and took some classes at Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit. He was a big Pentecostal pastor in southeastern Michigan.
Oh, right. I loved him.
Yeah, he was amazing.
Alex Jones was great. He and his wife both. I love them. They were just such a great, wonderful couple, and so vibrant.
Yep. Well, Father, thank you for this. I know we're out of time, but thank you for this and giving us your insight regarding St. John Henry Newman, and also how one becomes a doctor of the Church and what it means. And so I hope it really inspires people to do a quick search on John Henry Newman. We're going to be talking about this more next week with the Cardinal Newman Society, but what a great event coming up this Saturday. Another doctor of the Church, number 38, St. John Henry Newman. Pray for us. To be deep in history is to cease to be Protestant. We'll be right back. Thanks, Father.
Bye.
We as Catholics know from our teachings that the Eucharist is the source and summit of our faith. And why do so many Catholics drift away from the Church and don't realize what they have, not only in the Eucharist, but the other beautiful sacraments? So we'll talk about that this morning with our next guest, Father Gregory Pine. The beautiful book is Your Eucharistic Identity, a sacramental guide to the fullness of life. Father, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. So what prompted you to write this particular book about our beautiful Jesus in the Eucharist? Thanks for joining us.
My joy. Yeah, thanks for having me. So there was the Pew Research study that went out detailing that a lot of Catholics don't necessarily believe or recognize that Jesus is truly or really present in the Eucharist. And so one of the brothers and I, I'm a Dominican friar, and so we live in community, and one of the brothers and I thought that it might be a good opportunity in which to frame Eucharistic belief and confession in terms of the types of questions that people are asking. So it seems like a lot of people are asking questions about identity, like who am I and what am I for? And so we thought we'd situate those questions in our life of Eucharistic worship, because that's the place where we're best able to receive God's answers.
Do Catholics think of themselves as having a Eucharistic identity, though? What do you think?
I mean, like, whether we do or don't, it's probably a matter of how closely we pay attention or how well we take to heart the gifts that God bestows on us in the Catholic Church. But I think we ought to have a Eucharistic identity, because I think a lot of folks are tempted to kind of craft their own identity so that they can feel themselves unique and have themselves belong to whatsoever group they think will kind of validate them. And that's not to point fingers or anything. I think all of us want to be unique. All of us want to belong. but we have difficulty finding our place and experiencing meaningful, purposeful work. And as a result of which, sometimes we define ourselves by less than our highest dignity, by less than the real grandeur to which we're called. And so when we can situate those questions or just bring our hearts to the Lord in the setting of Eucharistic worship, we're better able then to actually discover who we genuinely are and what we're really for.
So what does that look like in a perfect world, having a Eucharistic identity?
Yeah, you think about this teaching that we belong to the mystical body, and in the mystical body we each have a place, we each play a part. And in that body, obviously, like, not every cell is the same, not every cell has the same role, or not every organ is the same, not every organ has the same role. And so, like the Blessed Virgin Mary, for instance, she's more blessed than I am, and she has received greater graces than I have. And that could be an occasion for jealousy or even envy. But in the mystical body, it's not, because we recognize that, it's for the foot to walk, and it's for the eye to see, and it's for the heart to circulate blood. And in the setting of Eucharistic worship within the liturgical assembly, but, as we bring our sacrifices to the altar and as we receive that outpouring of grace, the Lord heals us and he grows us and he helps us to abandon ourselves to his saving plan, which is tailor-made for each of us. Like the Lord finds us or makes us each to be precious, but in different ways. And I think that it's hard to acknowledge that at the outset because we might prefer to be someone else or do something else. But when we see it as the fruit of the Lord's love poured out for us on the altar, we have an easier time reconciling ourselves to it and embracing his plan.
We're talking with the author of a beautiful new book from our friends at Ignatius Press, Your Eucharistic Identity, a Sacramental Guide to the Fullness of a Life. The author is our guest, Father Gregory Pine. So in the book, Father, you're talking about the Eucharist not being magic. We have to receive the gift of his Eucharistic presence and prepare for such a great banquet. And to prepare for that requires time, work, and attention. To become like Christ, you say, we must be ready to be given to others in a free, radical gift of love. I think this is key because somehow I think sometimes we take the Eucharist so much for granted. We think, well, okay, so I go to communion, then what happens? And they're waiting for something to happen after they receive the body and blood of our Lord. But we have to be in union with him to get the benefits of that gift, right?
Exactly. And receiving Holy Communion, the Lord gives us Holy Communion with an eye to a particular kind of growth. So just as the sacraments themselves aren't magic, causing automatically what they would suggest, they require us to approach them with real faith and real intention, not in the sense that we have to clench our fists and squint our eyes in order to profit from them, but that's to say that we should receive them as the Lord intends them to be received. And so that's the whole idea of the book, is that we would pay attention to the signs, not in the spirit of anguish or anxiety, but in the spirit of genuine openness to his gift. And I think that the Lord intends the sacraments to heal us and to grow us over the whole course of our lives. So that's characteristic of our human lives, that they take time, that they unfold gradually. And so the Lord gives us this heavenly food to accompany us along that journey, along that pilgrimage. And so the changes that the Eucharist works in our lives are often subtle changes. It's the type of thing where you might look back to 5 years ago and think to yourself, oh, wow, my life has changed since then. But you won't necessarily notice it in the moment of Eucharistic reception, like, wow, I feel better, or wow, I feel more charitable. Mm-hmm. It's the type of thing which often happens it happens in a deeper way than we could typically sense or register.
So break down the book for us, if you would, Father, in terms of how you walk through the reader with the idea of building up to this Eucharistic identity.
Sure. So the basic idea is to just affirm our identity in God. So we're creatures, which means that we receive our lives as a gift. And then to kind of talk further about what it means to be adopted sons and daughters of God. So we're not just creatures, but we're creatures called the communion, and communion of a high sort, a sort that goes beyond rocks and plants and animals. And then to think specifically about how the Lord bestows upon us the capacity to believe, to confess the faith, and the capacity to celebrate and receive the sacraments as a way of deepening that identity or appropriating that identity. And then the heart of the book is really about the signs at work in the Eucharistic liturgy. So the basic idea is that sometimes as Catholics we define ourselves against, we're not like these secular folks, or we're not like these Protestants, or we're not like these, whatever. And sometimes when we do that, we end up missing out on the full breadth of our church's teaching. And so we hear sometimes Protestants will say things like, the Eucharist is just a symbol. And so we say, oh, the Eucharist isn't a symbol. It's, fill in the blank. But as it turns out, there are signs at work in the sacraments, right? The sacraments are just signs of sacred things that make us holy. They're powerful signs. They're potent signs. They're not mere symbols, but there is a symbolic value. So the heart of the book is just paying attention to the signs that work in the Eucharist so that we can profit from the grace which the Lord makes flow through those signs. So specifically like the sign of the sacrifice, the sign of nourishment, and then the sign of the union of the mystical body.
There are so many Eucharistic miracles, and they're available for us to view. My husband and I live part-time in Italy, and we took our most recent pilgrimage to the Eucharistic miracle in Orvieto, the corporal miracle of the corporal that happened in Bolsena, and we also took them to Cascia to venerate the relics of St. Rita, but also the Eucharistic miracle there as well. And these things are there for us to realize the power of this sacrament, that it really is Jesus, body, blood, soul, divinity. But sometimes, Father, it seems so hard for us to wrap our heads and our minds around that, right?
No, certainly. Like at the end of the day, the Eucharist is strange in the sense that it's not the type of thing which immediately makes sense to us. And I think it's no surprise that it's one of those doctrines which people who come to embrace the faith often find most difficult to understand or most difficult to submit to, because there's no real natural analogies for it. We have a real hard time saying, oh, well, the Eucharist is just like X, or the Eucharist is just like Y. We can't really point to other things in creation where the substance of a thing changes, but its appearance remains the same, or that something which wasn't God becomes God. So that's it's just beyond our comprehension in the sense that it's not like incomprehensible, but it's super comprehensible. And so I think that it highlights for us the importance of approaching these mysteries with the disposition of docility, to receive what the church teaches with a spirit of openness, and then to recognize that, okay, I believe because the Lord says so. I don't necessarily believe because it jives with my thoughts, or I don't necessarily believe because I would have reasoned to this on my own. I believe because truth himself speaks truly, or else there's nothing true.
Right. Very well said. Talking with Father Gregory Pine. He is a professor of dogmatic and moral theology at the Dominican House of Studies, and assistant director at the Thomistic Institute, the author of Prudence, Choose Confidently, Live Boldly. He also holds a doctorate from the University of Freiburg in Switzerland and regularly contributes to the podcasts of Godsplaining and Pites with Aquinas. What can we do in addition, obviously, to reading your book, because we want people to get it, but what can we do as Catholics to really help us develop that Eucharistic identity?
I think so. We seek to find ways of prolonging our Eucharistic worship. I think there's a real risk that, we just go to Mass on Sunday and our lives are Eucharistic for about an hour, and then they're less Eucharistic for 167 hours for the remainder of the week. And so I think this idea of kind of savoring that Eucharistic nourishment and finding ways of prolonging it or extending it throughout the course of the week. And I think that this is the idea of the regularity of the life of prayer, of making visits to the Blessed Sacrament. I think about my one sister. She has 5 children who are 9, 7, 5, 3, and 1. And she, prays each morning, and she'll often drive to the church, but she'll typically just stay in her car in the parking lot and then drive back home because she doesn't have much time, but it's still important to her to be close to the Blessed Sacrament, not because she treats it like a rabbit's foot or a magic talisman, but because there's a real sense that God makes himself especially available in the Eucharist, and that we ought to, seize the opportunity. So I think putting ourselves kind of in the line of fire, putting ourselves in close proximity to the Lord and his Eucharistic presence is also something that we should be conscious of, because there's a real difference between praying in a church or praying near a church and just praying in your room. Obviously, we should seek to pray always, and it's good to pray with regularity, irrespective of whether or not we can get to a church. But just this idea of attending Mass with frequency, receiving in a worthy state, prolonging our Eucharistic worship through the habit of daily prayer, and seeking to make it to adoration as that's made available in our local diocese or local parish.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And even if you can only go, let's say, for 15 or 20 minutes, you don't have a lot of time. If you have a lot of responsibilities with your family, as you mentioned, just to be there, there's just something about sitting in that chapel in the church with the Blessed Sacrament.
There is indeed. There is indeed. Yeah, in the last chapter
so go
of the
ahead,
book,
Father.
basically
Finish.
about
Sure,
that.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry.
No, that's okay. I just love the fact that you're reminding us of the importance of Eucharistic adoration. I also think, too, if people can, and I'm just saying this because I just think the Eucharistic miracles are so phenomenal. I wish they had these huge marquees outside these churches where the Eucharistic miracles are. God's here, but he's there every day, right? In the Mass, we know that. But just so more people would realize, I mean, because these Eucharistic miracles are incredible. They're absolutely incredible in terms of, yes, this really is God. It has been studied. It has been tested. It has been proven that the Eucharist is body, blood, soul, and divinity.
Yeah, I was recently in the Diocese of Orange County at their cathedral, and they had this huge exhibit of all the different Eucharistic miracles, and I was just blown away. I mean, it filled a whole expo hall. So the Lord makes himself known, and often to people of weak faith, which is fascinating.
Yeah. Father, thank you so much. Beautiful book, Your Eucharistic Identity, a Sacramental Guide to the Fullness of Life. How's it doing so far? Is it well received? I'm sure it is.
I hope so. I don't really know. I live under a rock, so I don't always pop up to determine how things are going.
You're not going on Amazon and looking at your numbers or talking to Ignatius. I get it. You've got better things to do. But we're grateful for all of your great work. The book, again, is Your Eucharistic Identity, a Sacramental Guide to the Fullness of Life. It is published by our friends at Ignatius and written by our guest, a wonderful Dominican, Father Gregory Pine. Thanks, Father. Appreciate you. Appreciate your great work.
My joy. Thanks so much for having me.
Have a blessed day, and we are going to be taking a break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about what you're going to be speaking or hearing of in the next hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio Extra. Speaking of the Godsplaining podcast, I found this really cool interview with the coach of the Boston Celtics who's interested in becoming a deacon, as a deacon's wife. That really got me interested, so I listened to it. It's a fabulous interview. We're going to play part of it for you in the next hour, and then we'll also talk about some pretty big pro-life stories, some developments legally with my friend and amazing attorney, Erin Mersino. We'll be right back. Hope you're having a blessed Thursday. It's October 30th here on EWTN's Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio. Great to be with you on a Thursday morning as we move quickly. Oh my goodness, so quickly through the month of October. As I mentioned before the break, great stuff coming up in the second hour as well as the first hour. We have, as I mentioned, we are going to play for you part of an interview with the coach of the Boston Celtics. I was very, very inspired by what he had to say. So I'm going through all these different websites, as I always do to prepare for the show. And I like to go to some of the non-Catholic or evangelical websites to see what our Protestant brothers and sisters are talking about and in what they're interested. And I came across an article about the coach of the Celtics. I had it on the evangelical website. I think it was Christian Post or Christianity Today. I can't remember. And what caught my attention was that he said he's thinking about being a deacon. And I thought, wow, imagine that. Here he is, a coach of the Boston Celtics, extremely successful. And what is he thinking about? Thinking about the higher things. Well, the whole interview was super encouraging. I can't play the whole thing. It's almost, I think, 36 minutes long. But I picked an interesting chunk of it, so we'll share that with you in our 2 cents segment, and I'll have some comments as well. And then one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, my dear friend Erin Mersino, who's a Michigan-based attorney handling some major, major cases. She's a religious freedom attorney. She's a pro-life attorney. She's a dynamo. And we're going to talk about some stories that are making headlines, legal stories in the pro-life community, including a man from our home state of Michigan whose case regarding praying silently outside of an abortion mill, unfortunately, is not going to be able to go to the Supreme Court. We'll have some other news for you, too, as well. More Catholic Connection coming your way on EWTN's Radio Extra. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's hour number 2 of Catholic Connection. Great to be with you on a Thursday here on EWTN's Radio Extra. We have a great lineup for the second hour as well. I think for our 2 cents segment, you're really going to enjoy this interview that was conducted on the Godsplaining podcast, which is a Dominican podcast. As a matter of fact, we mentioned it in the previous interview in the first hour with Father Pine, but it's an interview that they did with the coach of the Boston Celtics, all about his faith life, his professional career, and what he sees as most important in his life. You know, he has a set of rosary beads made from the parquet floor of the Boston Celtics arena. I'm not kidding. And he talks about that in this interview. He also talks about the fact that he's interested in becoming a deacon and how he puts his priorities with God and family first. It really is a wonderful interview, and someone who just gets it in terms of how the world can pass away, those worldly things. And he says, you know, I want to make sure I'm not like the rich young man. He said, I want to make sure that I understand that I have to always be grateful and put God first. It's very, very encouraging, especially when we think about the world of sports and how so many things there are out of control, not to mention ethics and morals in terms of the whole transgender agenda, but even people who are putting all the emphasis on money and success. So it's very, very encouraging. Can't play the entire interview because it's over 30 minutes long, but we play a nice chunk of it, as I mentioned earlier. And then we're going to take a look at some of the top stories in the pro-life world. We're going to be interviewing my dear friend and fellow Michigander, Erin Mersino. She's a phenomenal attorney, and she's been representing some big cases. Of course, she's been at the Supreme Court many times. And we're going to be talking about some big pro-life stories, including a story in our own state of Michigan, which is pretty pathetic. And then if we have time, the Napa Legal Institute came out with a new report on what states are most friendly to religious organizations, nonprofits. Our state of Michigan is the absolute worst. Not that I'm surprised by that, given our governor and attorney general there, but still, what does it mean to have a strong state that supports religious freedom? We'll take a look at those numbers and some other breaking news stories. There's a story I just saw this morning that's just horrible. This is out of Breitbart, and this is out of Florida. And, you know, this happens quite often, but unfortunately only the conservative media report this. This is about a Florida man who's been found guilty of shooting and killing his pregnant girlfriend because she refused to get an abortion. And yet they say that there's no coercion or anything with abortion. Okay, sure. Let's take a look at the forecast before we get into the news this morning on a busy Thursday, October 30th. We have widespread rain showers and thunderstorms expected from the Ohio Valley into the Northeast, and that is through tomorrow. The National Weather Service also telling us there's an isolated and damaging wind and tornado threat that could occur from coastal North Carolina into parts of the Mid-Atlantic, and that could happen today. They're also saying moderate to major coastal flooding is forecast along the East Coast, and that is for the second half of this week, so the rest of this week will be impacted by some severe weather. It is a Thursday, and tomorrow, of course, All Hallows Eve, All Saints Day on Saturday, All Souls Day on Sunday. Hope your week is going well. Right now, though, almost 4 minutes past the hour, and we need to check the news here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Hurricane Melissa is said to have killed over 24 people in the Caribbean. That according to a number of reports. Melissa bringing heavy winds and rain to the Bahamas through last night, and it brought devastating flooding to Cuba after slamming into Jamaica on Tuesday. Meanwhile, officials in the island nation of Jamaica are assessing now the impact of Melissa. It was a Category 5 storm that hit the island, packing winds of 185 miles an hour. Jovan Johnson is a senior reporter at the Jamaica Gleaner and says thousands of people are now in shelters.
We still yet don't have a handle on the scale of the impact of Hurricane Melissa. The authorities, the Prime Minister expected to lead a tour by helicopter just to get a sense of how widespread the damage is.
Hurricane experts say Melissa is the second strongest Atlantic hurricane in recorded history. It also tied the record for the strongest Atlantic hurricane to make landfall. Melissa's winds have since died down to 90 miles an hour, making it a Category 1 storm. And on yesterday at the end of the audience, Pope Leo XIV said his thoughts were going out to the Caribbean hit by the storm. He said of catastrophic power. In his appeal, Pope Leo also assuring everyone, he says, of his closeness, adding he is praying for those who have lost their lives, for those who are fleeing, and for those populations who are awaiting the storm's developments, are experiencing hours of anxiety and concern. He went on to encourage civil authorities to do everything possible, and he thanked Christian communities and volunteer organizations for the relief they are providing. The president is headed back to D.C. after announcing he's reached a one-year deal with China on critical rare earth minerals and some tariffs. Trump announcing that deal after his meeting with the Chinese president in South Korea. It would see fentanyl-linked tariffs on China lowered by 10%, cutting tariffs on Chinese exports cut from 57% to 47%. Trump also announcing that China will start buying American soybeans again, and he also said he plans to visit China next year. Tammy Trujillo tells us there's new documents that were released suggesting former President Biden's FBI may have investigated more than 160 members of the GOP.
Iowa Republican Chuck Grassley spoke about the new information.
The subpoena requested records and communications related to over 430 individual and organizations. All of them appear to be aimed at Republicans.
The so-called Arctic Frost probe looked into 2020 presidential election interference allegations. Republican members of the House Judiciary Committee said those who were potentially under investigation included Steve Bannon, Rudy Giuliani, and Mark Meadows. In a Truth Social post last week, President Trump accused the investigation of spying on senators and House members. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Texas voters will head to the polls next week to consider Prop 15, the Parental Rights Amendment, a constitutional amendment aimed at enshrining parents' rights in the state's constitution. As Catholic News Agency explains on their website today, the measure, if approved, would add language to the Texas Constitution, affirming that parents have the right to exercise care, custody, and control of the parent's child, including the right to make decisions concerning that child's upbringing and the responsibility to nurture and protect the parent's child. Texas already ranking among 26 states with a Parents' Bill of Rights enshrined in state law. That existing statute grants parents a right to full information concerning their child at school, as well as access to their child's student records, copies of state assessments and teaching materials, among other things. The Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops telling Catholic recognize the natural right of parents to direct their children's upbringing. And Mark Mayfield explains the Vice President, J.D. Vance, was at an event remembering Charlie Kirk and saying that Charlie Kirk's death was a tragedy for the United States of America.
Vance delivered remarks at a Turning Point USA tour stop at the University of Mississippi on Wednesday.
He was a person who, particularly to the young people of this country, to all of you, he had the very best advice. And I think that's the most important way for me to honor Charlie, which is to repeat that advice.
He went on, saying Kirk's most important advice to young people was to get married and start a family. Vance was a close friend of Kirk, who was assassinated at a speaking event in September. Vance appeared alongside Erica Kirk, the late conservative activist wife, and the new CEO of TPUSA. I'm Mark Mayfield.
And as you just heard, the widow of Charlie Kirk also paid tribute to her late husband yesterday.
You guys have no idea how helpful it is to have all of you in my life, because you help me feel even more deeply connected to my husband.
Erica Kirk saying her husband believed in the importance of Gen Z.
Gen Z, you are the courageous generation. Hear me when I say that. My husband believed that to his core.
The event coming over a month after Turning Point USA's founder was assassinated at a speaking event in Utah. The Supreme Court won't be issuing a ruling on President Trump's National Guard troop deployment to Chicago until sometime next month. Yesterday, the High Court asking for additional briefing before it makes its ruling. The justice is asking for both the Trump administration and the state of Illinois to address the term regular law in the federal law used by the president to deploy the Guard. The deployment of National Guard troops to Chicago was blocked earlier this month by a federal court, and the Supreme Court is now indicating it won't issue a ruling until November 17th at the earliest. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says another interest rate cut in December is not a foregone conclusion.
In the near term, risks to inflation are tilted to the upside and risks to employment to the downside. A challenging situation. There is no risk-free path for policy as we navigate this tension between our employment and inflation goals.
This after the central bank lowered interest rates by a 0.25 percentage point yesterday. It marked the second straight interest rate cut, Powell acknowledging the government shutdown impacted the decision-making process due to the limits of available information. The benchmark rate is now in a range of 3.75% to 4%. The Fed's cut has a trickle-down effect on consumers, lowering mortgage, credit card, and auto loan interest rates. And the White House is announcing another plan meant to lower the cost of prescription drugs in the U.S.
This is a victory for patients, for innovation, and for common sense.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. saying the FDA will make it easier for biosimilars to enter U.S. markets, something Europe has been doing for years. Biosimilars are those drugs similar to those at work and already have been approved by the FDA. Kennedy says he's cutting the red tape and clinical trials that are necessary before these types of drugs can be sold in the country. Hundreds of manufacturing jobs, as Rick Eucharistic tells us, are being lost in the Buckeye State.
General Motors is planning to cut thousands of jobs, according to the Detroit News. Among them, 550 workers at the joint venture Ultium Cells battery plant in Lordstown. Electric vehicle sales across the country have dropped 75% since the passage of President Trump's big, beautiful budget bill earlier this year, which eliminated a $7,500 federal tax incentive. GM CEO Mary Barra sent a letter to shareholders last week saying the company was in the process of reassessing its EV manufacturing footprint. The report from the Detroit News also said there would be temporary layoffs at the Lordstown plant, but no details on those are available at this time. I'm Rick Eucharistic.
A health expert offering some tips on how to recognize possible mental health related issues in children. Child psychologist Kate Eshelman with the Cleveland Clinic says increased crying, irritability, and anger, as well as frequent stomach and headaches, are a sign a child could be suffering from anxiety as well as depression.
I think it's always important to approach with curiosity. So ask open-end questions. How are you feeling? How did you feel about that? And then, kind of pare down if you feel like you need to.
Eshelman also says parents should look for changes in behavior, such as a child no longer engaging in activities they're used to enjoy. She recommends parents reach out to their pediatrician if there are concerns in these areas. And a small zoo's worth of animals found hidden in a truck going across a South Texas checkpoint into Mexico. Customs agents seized 24 royal pythons, 4 tarantulas, okay, that creeps me out, and 3 bearded dragons, amongst others. The agency saying in a statement the smuggling of exotic pets is on the rise. A pickup was seized and the driver was arrested. The animals were handed off to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. And finally, in our news segment, Monica Nelson tells us a new study suggesting that women may need less exercise than men to have a healthy heart.
Researchers in the UK followed over 85,000 adults wearing fitness trackers for about 7 years to examine how physical activity relates to heart disease. The study found women who got around 4 hours of moderate exercise each week lowered their risk of heart disease by about 30%. It found men, however, needed about 8 hours of exercise per week to achieve the same level of heart health. The study also confirmed that being active at any level was associated with a lower risk of heart disease. I'm Monica Nelson.
And we'll be right back to continue our discussion here on EWTN's Radio Extra. October 30th edition of Catholic Connection continues with a very wonderful interview, a Catholic basketball coach who certainly has his priorities in order. Stay tuned. How are you? Hope you're having a great day. It's a Thursday. It's October 30th. 2 more days in the month of October. My goodness, time flies when you're having fun. And we have a great time here on the program. I hope you think so too. My goodness, what a great interview that was done with the Boston Celtics coach on living with purpose and Father Joseph Anthony from Godsplaining. It's a Godsplaining podcast. We talked about it actually briefly with our previous guest in the first hour, Father Pine, who's also a Dominican. And so this coach sits down with this priest and talks basketball. And it's obvious the priest knew a lot about basketball because there's all this inside stuff that I didn't get. But the overall message was you have to have your priorities in order. And God has to come first. And despite all of his success over the years, now being a very young coach of the Boston Celtics, Joe Mazulla has never, ever given up on God or what God may have in store for him. And he has, again, his priorities in the right place. And so he talks about this with Father Anthony. And it was so interesting because it caught my attention. It was actually on an evangelical newspaper website, a news site. And so I'm reading this article, I'm thinking, wow. And they're talking about Joe Mazulla and his Catholic faith. So on a couple of levels, in addition to this being a really great interview, I'm hoping that there are many fallen away Catholics who may now be evangelical, go to those types of websites and see this Catholic man talking about being a deacon, talking about Jesus, talking about the cross. It's a phenomenal interview. And for me as a deacon's wife, it was very interesting because toward the end of the interview, he talks about wanting to be a deacon in the one holy Catholic and apostolic faith. So here's a little bit of that interview with Coach Joe Mazulla from the Boston Celtics on Godsplaining, talking about his faith. Take a listen.
It's not eternal, and it will go away, and finding moments to appreciate it. But it's something that I cherish doing, and it's been amazing for really for my perspective and my spiritual growth.
Mm-hmm. How did your devotion to the Rosary come about? And give me a little more perspective on
if I have to take it back to the earliest, at St. Mary's in elementary school, we would do the Living Rosary.
Okay.
We would go outside and make a shape of the Rosary, and each person would represent a bead, and we would pass the microphone around, and everyone had to. Do they still do this?
I remember doing that when I was in grade school and high school. Like
when you pass the microphone, and everybody is a bead within the Rosary, and it was called the Living Rosary.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it started. And I remember to this day doing that. I don't remember exactly when we did it, but we do it 3-4 times a year. And I think it started with that. And then as I've gotten older, my wife and I love to travel and go into different churches around the world or the country. I like collecting ones from all different places. So I have I got the Celtics one. I have one from Colombia made out of Colombian coffee beans.
Ooh.
That's a really interesting one. And so then because I like studying how just the faith and how it's represented, how it's practiced, how it's cherished in different places of the world. So it's that's the earliest memory I have of the Rosary, and I think it just kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, and it just kind of became that devotion that is almost a thread through.
What's your favorite mystery?
Wow, you're on it with me. I was going to fire the question to you in my rapid fires. My favorite mystery is actually the Scourging of the Pillar.
Yep.
For some reason, that is a very vivid mystery for me, and I can really enter into that mystery. And I've always found that one captivates my prayer. And maybe sometimes when I get distracted from the Rosary, when I hit that mystery, I'm always just locked in.
Mine's the mysteries as a whole, but those are
all of them.
Yeah, the sorrowful mysteries as a whole is mine, and I probably pray that one even on some days when it's not Tuesday or Friday. Just going to Jerusalem and carrying the cross through the streets of the old city, it brought that mystery to life for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I love that. All right, well, we'll get you rosaries as I travel and pick up rosaries. Like I said, as promoter of the Rosary now, I'll make sure that if I find anything fun and unique, I'll kick it over your way as well. Kind of add it to your collection.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's end with a few rapid fire questions, okay? And once again, really appreciate the time. The first rapid fire question was, what is your favorite decade of the Rosary? So you've already answered that.
Yeah.
So we'll move on. What's the most
powerful? It's probably carrying of the cross.
Okay. Yeah. They're right there in the middle of it all. What is the most unique place you have gone to Mass?
It would have to be, the many different spots within Jerusalem that we did. The Holy Sepulchre Church, in Bethlehem. The best one was in Galilee at the Mary Magdalene. There's a new hotel in Galilee that has a beautiful chapel.
Really?
I forget the name of it, but I think it's the Magdalene. But anywhere in Jerusalem where we were able to have it, or Israel in general.
Yeah. And speaking of Jerusalem, to our listeners, please pray for the Christians in the Holy Land. It's a very delicate situation. They're very tough, and they all need our prayers and support. Another question, your top 3 favorite coaches?
Let's see. Pep Guardiola's up there. He's in my top 3.
Yes. Love Pep. Love Pep.
One. I'm just going to offend everybody else after that.
All right, we'll leave it at Pep then.
We'll just go with Pep.
We'll leave it at Pep. Yeah, he's an absolute legend. And
anyone else, I'm just gonna, he's so good. Everyone's okay being after him, but now I'm just going to start offending people if I
exactly
off the list. But I will say, I remember all of my coaches that I've had in my life, in my career, dating back to like 5th grade CYO coaches, Mike and Jeff. We practiced 5:30 to 8. And I remember like we used to run these 3-4 same plays all the time. So like one of the reasons why I got into coaching is like I never had a negative experience with a coach, and every coach I had cared about me as a player and a person, and I'm very grateful for every coach that I had. So like even the main ones, like just really grateful. All from CYO to high school to college, I just always had great coaches.
Nice. Biggest momentum play, backdoor alley-oop, or step back 3 as the shot clock goes off?
Momentum I would say a step back 3 as the shot clock expiring is detrimental to the defense, because you kind of study the body language of the defense during those times, and it's like you played great defense for 22 seconds, and like can you coach your team to not have an emotional letdown after a tough shot like that? So I think that's the one that you have to coach the most.
Yeah,
as opposed to
that's the biggest dagger.
Yeah,
because you're right. A single player can blow an assignment and lead to a backdoor, but the entire team has been holding on for the shot clock. Yeah. No, that's I like that. That's true. What would you say is your next professional goal?
Next professional goal. So I just became eligible to be a deacon, which was I've always wanted to do.
There we go.
I've been thinking about that.
Yeah.
Next professional goal. I'll tell you what, if I'm being 100% honest, I have no idea.
That's fine.
I've been praying to God about what that looks like.
That's fine.
I think winning has been scarier for me, because I'm like wrestling with God about like, do I get greedy and want more?
Yeah.
Or like, how do you find this space of wanting more yet being grateful for what God has given you?
Wow. Talk about a young man who has his head on straight. I mean, how beautiful, talking about the rosary. When's the last time you remember talking with or hearing a football coach or a basketball coach in this case, or someone in the big, wide world of sports, as we used to say on ABC News, right? Talk about God so strongly and at the center of his life, everything. Talking about different mysteries of the rosary, talking about the Holy Land, talking about wanting to be a deacon. And again, as I mentioned, as a deacon's wife, I was very interested in what he said. He said, I've become eligible to be a deacon. So Deacon Dominic and I were talking about this morning when I was playing the interview for him, because what does that mean? Does that mean that he's applied for the diaconate and he's eligible to take part in the program? Because that's what normally happens. You have to apply, and then once you apply, there's an acceptance process, and it's called aspirancy. And so you have a year, in most cases, to discern the diaconate and whether you want to pursue the formation process. I want to find out, so we're going to put in a call and see if we can do an interview. Why not? All they could do is say no. But God bless Joe Mazulla. What a great young man. He's got his head on straight, for sure. Well, don't let her very calm and very sweet and sincere demeanor fool you. You don't want to go up against this young woman in court, trust me. She's a dynamo. She is a wonderful, wonderful sister in Christ. We've known each other for years. I know her in-laws. They're phenomenal. She comes from a wonderful family. Erin Mersino is the Vice President and Chief of Supreme Court and Appellate Litigation for Advocates for Faith and Freedom. And Erin and I were on a program together many years ago where we pretty much blew the host out of the water, mostly her, not me. Remember that? Remember that? Let It Rip on Channel 2?
I thought you blew the house out of the water. That was amazing.
That was an incredible time. Thank you for all of your support over the years. So much going on and so many cases you're representing. There was an interesting case in our home state of Michigan about a man praying outside one of the abortion mills. Let's start there, Erin, if we would.
Yes. So Matthew Connolly was with a group of individuals who were praying in a business complex outside of one of the abortion mills here in Michigan, as you were saying. And some of the individuals he was with went inside the abortion mill, but he did not. He stayed in the hallway and peacefully prayed in the hallway to himself, and was later found guilty in a jury trial of interfering with a business and trespassing and all of these other things, where he was only in the hallway that was open to the public of this building. And unfortunately, the Michigan Supreme Court decided not to hear the case, and we petitioned the United States Supreme Court, and they unfortunately also decided not to hear his case. So justice won't be done for him here on earth, but we continue to pray for him and his ministry.
When the High Court decides not to hear a case, do they give you reason for that? They just say they're not going to take it up. How does that work legally?
Most of the time, the Supreme Court issues its decision just with a one-sentence decision. Sometimes you will get a dissent from a justice, but here we did not. And so the Supreme Court has a lot of discretion with which cases it wants to take or not take. And I think that they may be a bit exhausted at this point with all of the decisions they've done that have been so beneficial for the country and religious liberty and for pro-life individuals. And unfortunately, they decided not to hear this man's case.
So what happens to your client now?
Well, he's served his time in jail, and now he continues on with his ministry.
Wow. And he was not interfering. He was in a public space. This seems pretty frightening. Is that because of the sentiment in our state of Michigan right now? Because there's a report that just came out from the Napa Legal Institute. I'm sure you saw it, about different states and religious freedom when it comes to nonprofit organizations. And our lovely state of Michigan has the worst record, Erin.
Yes, it is. It's very bad. But there was, especially when his case occurred, there was such hostility for anyone praying outside of an abortion clinic, and it was during the time where Biden was, cracking down on, the 90-year-old Holocaust survivor who was praying peacefully outside of the abortion clinic, and he was unfortunately caught up in that wave of hostility for pro-life individuals simply exercising their First Amendment free speech.
Do you think the climate, you mentioned some of the successes we've had at the Supreme Court, do you think the climate is improving for us?
I really do. There was one case, and I don't think that it's been really widely reported on, that came out last term, Mahmoud versus Taylor, which allows opt-outs for parents pursuant to their First Amendment right to religious liberty to opt their children out of any sort of curriculum that conflicts with their sincerely held religious beliefs. And it's something that's not really been widely publicized, but it gives parents the right to send a letter to their school district. And the school district, by law now, pursuant to the First Amendment, is supposed to protect the children from any sort of teaching or exposure to curriculum that violates the parents' sincerely held religious beliefs. So we have an opt-out form actually on our website, faith-freedom.com, where parents can fill in the form themselves. It's a letter and send it to their school district, and public schools are supposed to recognize this under the First Amendment. So that was actually a really monumental case, but it's one that hasn't been publicized.
And this to me is so important because I think sometimes parents feel overwhelmed and feel like they're on their own. But I think when they have something like this to back them up, it can make all the difference.
I agree.
We're talking with Erin Mersino, Vice President and Chief of Supreme Court and Appellate Litigation for Advocates for Faith and Freedom. Okay, some more good news. You won a motion to dismiss a Title IX claim, and this was, I believe, in, where was it, in the state of Texas? Tell me about that.
It's actually, Teresa, are you sitting down? It actually happened in the state of California.
Wow.
Before a judge who was appointed by a Democrat president, and she's a liberal judge, and this is one of our landmark Save Girls Sports cases that we're working on. And the judge actually found that Title IX was violated and harm incurs when a biological man is on a girls' sports team. The mere presence of a biological man on a girls' sports team is enough harm to satisfy, in the constitutional world, it's called standing. So she basically was able to prove her claim that she is actually harmed. And this liberal judge, this has not happened before in California, has found that yes, it is a harm.
Now, what happened? Did the judge fall on his or her head? I mean, what is California for crying out loud? Yeah, what happened?
It is. I think that it's marking really a sea change with this issue. But it's something where, you just have not seen that in California prior to this case. And this was one of the first cases that was actually filed challenging Title IX. And these poor girls, Teresa, they're high school girls, went to school. They had Save Girl Sports T-shirts. They were compared to Nazis and Hitler for exercising their First Amendment right to speak out in support of saving girls' sports. They've had to participate on sports teams with biological men who are stealing their positions, and they've really been ostracized by the community. And they were so brave and amazing for them, because it's not adults standing up on this issue, it's young teenage girls who are speaking out and fighting for their own freedoms and liberty. And so these girls are just so brave, and it's an honor to represent them. And it's extraordinary that the judge actually ruled in our favor in this case.
So is there an appeal possibly? Because, usually the other side, as you know, as an attorney, appeals these cases if they lose at the local level.
Yes. So right now the judge said, yes, you have a claim. I'm not going to dismiss this case, and we live on to fight another day before her court in California.
But this is a step in the right direction. Then you said you have another case on this as well, right?
Yes, we do. In that case, you may have heard of the individual, a biological man named A.B. Hernandez. And A.B. Hernandez won various track and field competitions for the entire state of California, of course, displacing girls who were competing against them, or requiring that the girls share the podium and have, the Pyrrhic victory, because they were saying, okay, this individual is not going to steal your spot, but we'll honor you as the second place winner, pretending as if you were the winner, as some sort of resolution that California tried to concoct. But here, our clients, one of them is on the track and field team, but all of them are on the volleyball team competing against this individual. And no one wants to play volleyball against A.B. Hernandez, because A.B. Hernandez has spiked the ball so hard. He's hit one of our clients in the face.
Yeah, he's going to hurt them. Hang on, Erin. We have to take a break. We'll pick this up at the other side. We're talking with fabulous attorney Erin Mersino with Advocates for Faith and Freedom, bringing us up to date on some pretty important stories. We'll be right back. So many stories making headlines regarding our religious freedom and pro-life issues, and Erin Mersino, an amazing attorney, is at the heart of it all. She's the Vice President and Chief of Supreme Court and Appellate Litigation for Advocates for Faith and Freedom. The website is faith-freedom.com for more information. Again, faith-freedom.com. Okay, let's continue with this important story about A.B. Hernandez. So this is a pretty big deal.
Yes. So A.B. Hernandez has caused injury to his fellow teammates. We've also seen many pictures and videos, unfortunately, of when the girls are celebrating with A.B. Hernandez or meeting in a huddle, that A.B. Hernandez actually has his hands on the girls' bottoms during the huddles. It's not something that girls typically do with each other, and it's something that made the girls feel very uncomfortable. And they actually complained to the officials at their school, and the school didn't do anything until after we filed this lawsuit. But A.B. Hernandez is changing in the girls' locker room. One of the girls was actually relegated to a different bathroom, so declared really a second-class citizen, not able to go into her own locker room or bathroom, and instead had to use the faculty bathroom while A.B. Hernandez uses the girls' locker room and bathrooms. So during the season, we've seen a lot of the games being forfeited. I think the count is up to 9 different games that were forfeited by opposing teams because they don't want to play against this girl's, the girls' team because of A.B. Hernandez's presence on the team, and that it does make it an unfair competition. And this is something we see that it affects girls.
How does this benefit anyone, Erin, in terms of sports for women, or even for A.B. Hernandez if he wants to? He's identifying as a female, but he's a male. How does it help him? He's not getting. Okay, maybe he's getting a few awards here and there, but the sport is not being played. No one's winning here.
Yes, that's right. No one is winning here. The games are being canceled. The girls are being injured, and not just right now, but in life. So we've seen how important Title IX has been for women. And looking at the different reports of all Fortune 500 companies who have female CEOs, 94% of the female CEOs played high school sports. So this is something, having fair competitions, it's been so good for women. So it affects them not only in these games in their high school, but it affects them in the game of life. And what message is society sending them to say, okay, it doesn't matter if this is a fair competition with other females. We're going to put in a biological male who's just, by pure biology, stronger, taller, able to spike the ball harder, able to jump for a longer distance in the long jump, able to run faster, able to jump over hurdles easier, not through any fault of these women or how hard they're training, which they are training extremely hard, but just through this biological advantage, which was the entire reason that Title IX was created in the first place.
I want to go back to that statistic you just gave us. This, to me, is shocking. We should be hearing from feminists everywhere about this. 94% of female CEOs played high school sports. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct, for a Fortune 500 company.
Wow. All right, so think of the impact of that. I mean, I don't have to tell you this is what you do every day, but think of that. Okay, so obviously playing sports, which we knew, but this just drives this point home, and the ridiculous nature of this transgender agenda and how it's hurting women. You have these CEOs of these big Fortune 500 companies. We supposedly, right, everybody out there, especially on the left, wants more women CEOs, and why not? We all should, because we can do anything God allows us to do, whatever he calls us to do, and in many cases for women that is in the workplace, right? And so here's the opportunity for these women to develop, really good attitudes toward other people, to learn how to be strong, to take care of themselves physically, to be in difficult situations and overcome challenges. This is everything that athletics does for you. And yet they're being denied this. These women today are being denied it because of the transgender agenda. Where are the feminists on this, Erin? This is insane.
It is insane. That's a great question. And some are supportive of the original intent and meaning of Title IX, but others we see are not. But I do think that there's a big change happening in our country now, finally, on this issue.
Where else are you seeing a positive change, do you think, right now?
Well, I mean, I think religious liberty in general, we've had so many really wonderful cases come out of the Supreme Court. And this issue, the Title IX issue, is actually going to be before the Supreme Court this term in the case West Virginia versus BPJ. The Supreme Court has accepted that case. The petitioners have filed the brief in support of the merits of the case. And now we're waiting for the response brief. And we participated, and we filed a friend of the court brief before the U.S. Supreme Court, stating we included that statistic that we just talked about with 94% of female CEOs at Fortune 500 companies having competed in women's sports, and just so much more information that it really goes to the heart of why this is so important and why women deserve their own categories. It's a matter of fairness. It's a matter of safety. It's a matter of having this federal right that was given to us by God, but it was put into the statute by Congress and signed by the president. And so it's the law of the land. It should be respected. It shouldn't be something that can be desecrated at the whim of, liberal states or liberal decision makers throughout the country.
Yeah, it's just so mind-boggling if you look at how women are being treated here and how the women are the ones who are suffering. And going back to this case with A.B. Hernandez, you mentioned the way he's physically touching these girls and how the girls are complaining about it. So first of all, they have opportunities that are being taken away from them just in the competition phase in terms of teammates and whatnot and being able to partake in these sports. Then you have their physical concerns because when you have a male playing on a women's team, the obvious difference as you described earlier. And then you have this isolation where they're being forced to go into another bathroom. And then you have on top of all of that, as if that's not enough, this feeling of really, in some levels, being sexually harassed by this person, the way he's touching them. This is so multi-level. And you think about the long-term impact this will have on these young women.
Absolutely. The fact that they complained to officials at their school and the school did nothing in response to their complaints. But they said, I'm feeling very uncomfortable with this behavior. I'm feeling very uncomfortable with this type of touching. And the school did nothing. And that really sent a message. But how wonderful now that we're ministering to these girls. And I think that they're really growing in their strength. And they're amazing. They're so courageous when society all around them is critiquing them and calling them terrible names, that they're standing up for the truth and standing up for their sincerely held religious beliefs. I'm just so amazed and proud of these girls.
Yeah, they're heroes. They're heroes. They're young heroes for us. Yeah.
They are.
There's another case you wanted to mention. We have a few minutes left, and this is an appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals regarding parents, correct?
Oh, yes. We have a case challenging a California law, SB 277, where California just decided to get rid of any sort of religious exemptions to their vaccine law. And the parents we represent object to vaccines that were manufactured or created with the use of aborted fetal cells. Mm-hmm. And California has told them that we're so sorry about your religious objection, but you still must go through with this, even though it directly violates your sincerely held religious beliefs. So we're challenging that case, and we've taken it now to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and it's pending before that court. So prayers that religious freedom is recognized in that case, no matter, which, maybe we have to take it to a higher court beyond that, but we're happy to fight that good fight, because California allows exemptions for all other sorts of reasons, such as following other federal laws regarding education and all various reasons. So how amazing that they would specifically target religious liberty as a basis for not providing an exemption.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. How important is it for people to have access to law firms like yours that are out there on the front lines? Because it seems to me although I do agree with you, I think the tide is starting to change and the pendulum is swinging the other way, because common sense is starting to rear its head again, thanks be to God, and people are realizing they've been under this cloud of liberalism and extremism for so many years, and now there seems to be at least some, the clouds are parting somewhat and moving in a better direction. But where would we be if we didn't have attorneys like you to take these cases and to really get them out there and to force these people to change their ideas, to change their minds about these cases, these things?
It's such an honor to be a part of it. And we knew it, the founding fathers knew that we had to be vigilant in defending our freedoms, our God-given rights. And we certainly, in these days, have to be very vigilant. And so it's very much an honor to be representing these really brave, incredible people who are willing to stand up for our First Amendment freedoms and our liberties. And if they didn't, then I agree, they would just simply be taken from us.
Yeah. And in terms of your own work, it doesn't sound like it's slowing down. I know that the environment is improving, but it sounds like you're super busy. Are there any other cases that you're working on right now that are making headlines before we let you go?
Yes. So we have a case that we're taking to the U.S. Supreme Court, Calvary Chapel, San Jose, versus the state of California. They are charging our clients millions of dollars for staying open during COVID. So we have that case coming up. But Teresa, we have so many active cases that we're working on. We're working tirelessly and trying to do our part in trying to preserve our liberties, our freedom of speech, freedom of religion, doing everything we can.
I'm hoping that we get to the day. I mean, we don't want us to lose our jobs. I mean, I'm out there speaking on pro-life issues and free speech issues as a Catholic journalist, and you're out there in the legal world. But I sure hope that we can maybe take it easy sometime soon.
I don't know if God called you for that, Teresa. You are such an amazing voice, and you.
Well, so do you.
You are so powerful.
Well, you are too. You are just something else. I mean, and you're so gentle and sweet and kind, but boy, I would never want to go up against you in court, sister. Let me tell you.
I would not want to have to go up against you, Teresa. I think that we're on the same side, and praise God for that.
Oh my goodness. Well, you're a blessing. And your website is fantastic. If people are being challenged for these similar issues, can they just go to your website and contact your wonderful attorneys?
Absolutely. Please come to our website, faith-freedom.com.
Well, listen, we have to have you on more often just to kind of keep us up to date on what's happening out there legal-wise, because you're just a superpower. You're a superwoman out there, sister. Love ya.
I think you are. I love you, Teresa. God bless you.
I love you more. Okay, now you give your kids a hug and you tell your in-laws that Teresa says hello, okay?
I absolutely will. You got it.
One of these days we have to pull up for our listeners. That would be funny if I could find that episode of a show called Let It Rip where Erin and I were on. That was a while ago. That was over 10 years ago, wasn't it?
Yes, that poor man who was debating you. My husband afterwards said, I hope someone gave him an ice pack. You really took him to task.
No, you did. You were sitting there looking so sweet with your cute little outfit, and then boom, you come out. That's great. It was really good television, I have to say. We'll have to tell that story sometime. We were talking about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, if you remember, and we were talking about how they were trying to expand it or something, and it was the LGBTQ agenda was in there, and you and I went back on that show and did our best to, in all charity, we were strong, but in all charity, trying to help these people see the light. But anyway, you're a doll. Love you. Have a great weekend, and hope to talk to you soon. My friend Erin Mersino, and yes, we're very old friends. Of course, she's a lot younger than I am, but we've known each other for years, and she's a powerhouse attorney, and we're so glad she's on our side, God's side. We'll be right back. I was telling my producer Richard about that episode of a show called Let It Rip on the Channel 2. I think it was a Fox affiliate, maybe a CBS affiliate back when we were on that program. I can't remember, but it was quite dynamic. It was about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and there was a whole LGBTQ agenda on there, and they were misquoting things, and they asked Erin and I to come on, she from an attorney perspective and me from a Catholic perspective. And we were both pretty solid in what we knew and had our facts right, and put it out there and let it rip, as the title of the show explains. But we were kind and we didn't yell. We just got our points across. So anyhow, I digress. Just giving you a little backstory there in terms of why we've known each other. Okay, coming up tomorrow, great show again. Lineup thanks to my amazing fab team at EWTN. We have Doug Keck who'll be joining us, and he joins us every Friday morning at 15 minutes past the hour to talk about the inside word. And we're going to be all over the big event this weekend in Rome. We're going to be there, right? Because we are everywhere, as our promo says. So we're going to be in Rome covering the announcement by the Holy Father, the big move to make, as Father Mitch discussed, St. John Henry Newman the latest doctor of the church, doctor number 38. By the way, there are 4 female doctors. Do you know who they are? St. Teresa of Avila, St. Catherine of Siena, St. Therese of Lisieux, and St. Hildegard. So there you go, Germany. 4 female doctors of the church and 38 doctors in total. It's going to be a great weekend. Have a great Thursday. We'll talk to you tomorrow on All Hallows Eve, moving into All Saints and All Souls weekend and November, my goodness. Have a great day.